What's shaking, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Orange Bloods Texas Football Channel. I'm Jeff Ketchum. That is Anwar Richardson. Today, we're talking about one of the wildest, seriously, this is not even like an over-the-top tease. It's one of the wildest claims made about the Texas football team that I think I've heard in a while. But before we do that, so that is actually a little bit of a tease. Before we get into the tease of the year so far, I want to let you know that this video brought to you by Underdog. Hey, if you're thinking about filling out a bracket, if you're thinking about if March Madness is on your brains and you're thinking about getting a little action on March Madness, that is where Underdog comes into the equation. They're a proud sponsor of, or proud partner with Orange Bloods. And again, anything that you're looking to get in the way of fantasy, gambling, again, getting some action and on March Madness, that's where Underdog comes into play. Download the app, check them out. They are a sponsor that we're getting to know a lot better. And as I, get into a little bit of more, have you filled out a bracket yet, Anwar?
I've got our Orange Bloods in front of us. I've got to do some more research, but I'm only a little bit more. I've learned that the less you know, the better your brackets are.
Yes.
So I won't overanalyze it. Any bracket I've ever been in with a bunch of sports people and then a bunch of folks who just pick off of colors, the people who pick off of colors always win, right? Pick up colors, mascots, everything like that. So I'm not gonna overanalyze. I'm just gonna get a little bit, but it will be coming. And I got my Underdog fantasy bracket coming as well.
I was about to say, I think the relationship with Underdog will ensure that I get a little action in on March Madness, and maybe that gets me a little more into March. That may be what I need.
Yeah.
Because if you give me anything that has money on the line or just fantasy purposes, I'm way more. So that's what I'll be into March Madness because of Underdog. Again, go check them out. Sponsor of today's video. Okay, Anwar. So the genesis of today's video is that ESPN Plus. So this is an insider article over on ESPN. With all due respect to their content, it's written by Tom Luganbill, who's an ESPN recruiting analyst. And the concept of the article is which 5 teams in 2022 can most be aided for a potential college football playoff run in 2022, this year, by the recruiting classes that they signed in December and February. And 4 of the 5 schools don't stick out at all. The article mentions Clemson, and you're like, okay, fell off a little bit last year, really good recruiting class. I can see it. There is Texas A&M, which for all that, without this turning into a Texas A&M video, it's a really good team with arguably the best recruiting class of all time, or a good enough recruiting class that's being said by some people. Like, I get it. There's Ohio State. Makes total sense. There's Baylor, which is interesting because I don't think instinctively associate Baylor with that kind of discussion, but that's a team that won a lot of games last year. It's a returning Big 12 champions. Maybe there's a level of respect that needs to be given to who they are coming into this season that I haven't completely wrapped my head around. And then there's Texas. 5-7 Texas, listed as a team whose 2022 playoff hopes are improved by this freshman class. And I mean, I get it because the recruiting class is really, really good, but there's no other team, Anwar, in college football that leaps in front of Texas in terms of college football playoffs for this year based on the help coming from its freshman class. Wow, that was not something I expected to read today.
It wasn't. And what's interesting, even in that conversation, Ketch, it was that Texas was listed at 4. So they were actually listed ahead of Baylor because it doesn't look like it was in alphabetical order or something like that. So to me, that was listed at 4th and Baylor
that's fair.
at 5. So which is even more surprising because then they're saying they would give Texas better odds than the defending Big 12 champion. So,
well, they're saying something weird. Like, I don't know if it's exactly that. It might be. Like, the whole thing blows my mind because there's actually a post on Orange Bloods that may still be like among the top threads on the board, which is 8-4, too pie in the sky.
It's always a fascinating look when you have people who are, don't have boots on the ground, the outside perspective, what they think the program is. And typically, Ketch, the perspective usually been the opposite. It's usually been Texas fans thinking this could be the year, and like the national people saying, nah, like that's 7 wins, that's 8 wins. And, it's always shouting down like some of the national stuff. So it's interesting in reverse when Texas fans are like, well, we'll just see, we suck until we don't, like all these kind of things.
This is the Bijan Xavier Worthy wow factor. It's all it is.
But they're basing it off the recruiting class, which says they believe this recruiting class can have an instant impact. And essentially, it's almost like saying, okay, we'll give you Alabama as that loss, but we expect Texas to be really, really good. Essentially, Bama would be the only loss. I mean, essentially that, and then they would essentially say Texas is running the table for the rest of the way to get into the CFP. That, he ain't saying it, but that's what he's saying.
It's weird. Like, I really would like to ask him, did you include Texas? Because I guess for me, there's 3 options. You think this recruiting class is so good that it had to be mentioned? B, because you think this returning team that Texas has is legitimately in that kind of discussion and then can be aided by a really good recruiting class? Or C, because it's Texas and you could move the needle a little bit social media wise, and you include Texas. We're having this conversation right now in this video because of how preposterous it is, but he has effectively done his job as a writer in doing something inside of that article that triggered us to do the video. How much was he going?
By the way, Ketch. What if there's a D? You said A, B, or C? I just want to give you a D option.
No, okay.
Or maybe he thinks Quinn Ewers is that good that he's a program changer.
Feels like you would need to say that if you really believe that. And what's, I think, really interesting is that, again, if we go back to the beginning of the article, it says that this article doesn't take into account any transfers. So if you believe that about Quinn Ewers, that he's so good that he turns the tables for Texas in that large of a degree, I think it's worth a little sentence in the middle of here's what Luganville does say about Texas specifically. We know, how can we put Texas on this list? Well, the current state of the Big 12 and the changeover at Oklahoma, this Longhorn class, despite the on-field performance last fall, ended up being very strong, and the conference is wide open. It's weird because Baylor literally is the next school listed in the list, so it's not that wide open.
True.
The quarterback position is settled, we think, but let's focus on where Texas gained the most ground: the offensive line and defensive front. 3 top 10 offensive linemen, including Devon Campbell, and 4 top 20 defensive linemen, featuring Justice Finkley, should drastically improve this team, on which skill is already abundant, but trench play needed to be upgraded. The secondary, the third premium position addressed in this class, features number 4 Brian Allen Jr. and number 16 Terrence Brooks. Much like Texas A&M, the Longhorns need to prove they belong and that their recruiting prowess isn't just a paper champion. Interesting. Thoughts on that, Anwar?
It's essentially he's saying that he believes this class is so good and such a game changer of a class that they will come out and one, he thinks he believes, like to your point, the Baylor thing is weird, but he believes that everyone else is down, and he believes this class propels Texas in a way that, typically, Ketch, you're waiting for a class to develop, right? You're waiting, 2 to 3 years, and what's your benchmark of really just determining like if a class is successful or not? You're like 3 years. And essentially, what the hit rate in 2022, I mean, how many guys are we talking about that would be contributing? I mean, that becomes the interesting thing, because if he's based off of that, he's saying like he expects not only a lot of these guys to contribute, but to hit the ground running.
That is the key point, I think, in the entire conversation, is that from his perspective, Texas is getting like a lot of impact this year from a lot of freshmen. And I think there's a little bit of disconnect in that. It's funny. You will find fans who are like 3 freshman offensive linemen. They're going to be starting by the Oklahoma game. But I think the alternative to that is I think there's an overwhelming consensus of people that realize if you're starting that many guys based on Texas does have returning players coming back. If you're playing that many young guys early on, it's really hard to know how to handicap. Shout out to Underdog, but it's hard to handicap. Like, what would you make of a Texas offense that's that young, that has a true freshman at left tackle and a true freshman at right tackle and a true freshman in the interior? That's a lot of growing up on the fly. It's not inconceivable that it could happen. It is inconceivable to think that many young guys could play and you're performing at a level that has you worthy of being discussed amongst the best teams in the country. Teams that are truly a player or 2 or 3 away from a national championship type of level. Texas is multiple recruiting classes away from, and it speaks to pressure. Like, by the time we get to August, is this what it's going to sound like? Texas fans who are like, there's no reason why we shouldn't be in the playoff. Because we've been joking that by the time we get to August, Texas fans will have convinced themselves that it's a 10-win team. That's not that far away from the type of territory that Luke and Bill is talking about.
And the question then becomes, is that undue pressure, on Sarkisian and undue expectations on the program? Or, Ketch, is that exactly what the expectations should be? Now, I guess there's a difference between expectations and projections, right? So, what you expect and what you project could be 2 totally different subjects and 2 totally different things. But I mean, it speaks to, one, the respect that Sarkisian has, that, national people will think he can do that and turn this around and make this into something like, of a national title contender, with, based off of a year where that just wouldn't be the formula of success. Like, I don't know how many people jump from 5 to like CFP, or, non-bowl game to CFP. Maybe there has been, but I can't think of anyone off the top of my head. Someone may put it in the
comments. Baylor a year ago would have at least been, they didn't make the college playoff, but by the end, I don't remember what they finished. They weren't that far away from it either. By the end of the year, when they'd rolled off a Big 12 championship and beaten Oklahoma and beaten Oklahoma State and kind of run the gauntlet of what was. And I think they had the game against BYU last year too that built. By the end of the year, they'd built up some respect, so they weren't that far away. But to get in, I think you're exactly right.
And then, Ketch, what this would essentially mean, that the scope that we would look at the Bama-Texas game would be totally different, other than, because then out of this prism, then you'd look at it and say, okay, this is how Texas measures up against a team that they could potentially see.
No.
Ketch!
No.
I'm saying,
not entertaining that.
I'm not saying entertain it. We're talking about the article.
I'm not letting you put that into my headspace.
In the article.
You finish your sentence. You go ahead.
In the article, as it projects, essentially, if it's saying that Texas could be a CFP team, then we're looking at week 2 as a potential see them in December. Out of the scope, out of the prism. Okay, I'm done. I'm just explaining.
I didn't hear. I heard 50% of that. I did a better job at the end of completely zoning you out. Look, I think that there's a couple of. I give Luke and Bill credit on this. It ends up being a successful article, I think, because it's caused this level of a reaction. So to that, I would say good job.
Yeah.
I think that, yes, if you're Sarkisian, this is not quite what you need written about your program right now. Because I think that one of the things that he potentially, this is year 2. There's a coach in Waco that in year 2 won a Big 12 championship and did it out of thin air, seemingly. So I think that there's already a bit of Aranda did it. So if you're elite of the elite, which Aranda raised his hand last year and said, that's who I am. I'm elite of the elite. And in year 2, we're just going to win the whole damn thing. And they won their bowl game.
Yeah.
It wasn't like he got punked. They won the Big 12 and then went out and got punked in a bowl game. Like they put an exclamation mark on it.
Yeah.
So I think that already exists. That even if it's not a huge talking point, you're not going to have to tell Texas fans that they will know that. They'll know that no matter what happens at the end of this year, there is a Dave Aranda did it in Waco in year 2. Don't tell me about any excuses.
Yeah.
And I think that, so he's already working with a fan base that everybody's excited because of recruiting, but when the season starts, they're going to want to win games. They're going to want to achieve success. They're going to want to know that the last year of Bijan Robinson's career, potentially in Austin, isn't wasted on a team that's just kind of mediocre. So this is a really difficult year. This is probably the most difficult remaining season for Sarkisian as coach at Texas, assuming this thing gets off the ground and they really start winning at a high level. This transition class between what happened in year 1 and, let's say, Quinn Ewers' second and probably last season, and then maybe Arch Manning after that, this season is the one that I think looms as most complicated. And, it's an interesting thing to react to. It's an interesting thing to think about. But the reality is this program, and I think the people that follow it closest realize they're years away, at least a couple, plural though, from being able to be in that kind of conversation. And it is unfortunate that it probably means that Bijan Robinson won't be along for the ride. And that maybe Quinn Ewers and Xavier Worthy aren't either, that maybe they're the building blocks to the thing that eventually gets over the hump. But, that's where 5 and 7 teams lie. They lie in the bed of uncertainty and mediocrity. And it rarely happens overnight where you go from that to the level that would need to be reached to warrant being in an article like the one they're included in today.
Yeah, I think you and I would definitely agree on that, Ketch. Like, it's a hell of a leap. Since I've been here, I've attended one Big 12 title game, that Texas has been in, and it's been clearly one since 2009. So, we're talking about a hellified jump. That's going from a layup to dunking to, from the free throw line. Like that's how much of a jump that is. I think you and I would say that we would still want to see it happen. Like, again, we still haven't seen Sarkisian post double-digit wins in a season, in his coaching career. So, there's still some things that I think there's some seeing is believing as associated with the team. Now, if we get to the Texas OU game and Texas only has one loss and Texas gets past, OU, then the articles with the videos that you and I are doing at that point, it's gonna say
it'll probably be very similar to this one, but even then they'll be, whoa, even then Sukumel should be in the background going, slow down. But you're right.
But yeah, I mean, if it's a 7-10 point loss against Alabama and then they beat an OU, then all of a sudden
see, you're doing now.
I'm just saying the circumstances. Come on, it's March, man. It's March.
I'm just saying everybody watching this video needs to know that all of the opinions and statements made in today's video do not necessarily reflect either one of us at 100%.
No, it'll be all it'll be remembered is that you and I called that Texas was going to the college football playoffs back in March. That's all it's going to be. No one will even remember that we were talking about an article. They'll just know.
They'll blame us for Lugan Bill's article.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's the same way if Arch goes somewhere else. Everyone's just going to remember your future cast, and no one's going to remember what anyone else said.
Well, they did that with my guy Hudson Card. Mm-hmm. It was the Athletic article that compared him to Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah,
and now like 18 months later, it's 100% Orange Bloods compared him, and it's like I'll finish the video the same way that we said it 18 months ago. Anwar and I, prior to this past season, had a pretty unhealthy love affair with Aaron Rodgers. You just have to know that's not a name we would use loosely. ever. And I say that as the president of the Hudson Card fan club. Like, just so you know, that would never have come out of my mouth. Look, what do you think about all this conversation? Leave your comments in the comments section. Look, maybe I'm wrong, man. Maybe there are more people thinking this thing's closer than Ketch is thinking it is. And Lugan Bill's right. And it's Campbell and Finkley and a little Terrence Brooks, and this thing's in the Big 12 championship game. And then at that point, you're close. Like maybe I'm wrong. If I am, leave it in the comments section. If we've made you chuckle, or you like a little bit of underdog, like whatever motivations would get you to either A, like the video, or B, subscribe to it, like right on. And hey, make sure you ring the bell, get notifications. I think we've said enough for Anwar Richardson. And unless, look, you good?
I'm good.
All right. For myself and Anwar Richardson, we have bled the turnip dry on this particular topic. Talk to you tomorrow. You guys be good. Later.